So we just saw some of the most important projects by Frank Lloyd Wright, like the Larkin, Unity, and Johnson Wax. And what other buildings can you tell us about where these patterns recur and become evident in the work of Wright?
Right. So this pattern, major space, minor space, entrance in between, balcony running around, skylight in the middle, hollow tubes carrying services, turns out shows up, quite a bit. So here is the Martin House. So 1903, 1905, it's the time of the Prairie-style house. Huge house. It's quite a big complex. We see there's guest house, the main house, back to stables, an arboretum, etc. And it was chopped up over the decades. An apartment building was dropped in between here and here. And we've come in recent years to respect our architecture, and city after city is saying, hey, if you've got something, it is bring in the tourist dollars. So this has been restored beautifully. And so if you're in Buffalo, New York, something you definitely want to visit. So here we see this thing spread into the landscape. We can think of Wright's relationship to Japanese architecture. And here we say, okay, so we have all this going on here, and then we come out with this arboretum here and sculpture at the end of it. And this looks sort of like his low-slung prairie-style houses. But then we realize there's more going on. At first, we don't notice it. Look at the plan and you say, well, it looks busy. But obviously, an architect doesn't just make it busy. There's something going on in, like John Sebastian Bach. There's a lot of notes there, but they're very strong patterns organizing them. And so we look at this, stare at that, and suddenly, bingo. There's a major space, minor space, entrance in between, hollows in which the mechanical drops through. It's the exact same pattern that he's using at that same time on Larkin and Unity Temple. So Larkin, Unity Temple, and the Martin House are all around the same time. And, you can also see cases, and maybe this is one of them, and certainly Louis Kahn does it, in which there's more to a house than it needs. And it's because the architect's exploring an idea that he's going to use later. So we saw the service towers on Louis Kahn's medical towers. Well, some poor client got a house with service towers on it. You just don't need that on a house. But Kahn was exploring that idea that he would then use on the medical towers. So then there's one more that you mentioned. And here we are, the Guggenheim Museum. And again, we said, well, there's a lot of curves and seems to be kind of active, and it seems to be totally different than anything it did before. But we look at it for a few minutes and we say, what do we have? We've got a major space and a minor space, entrance in between. We've got a balcony running around, skylight in the middle, and hollow tubes dropping through with services. So it's the exact same pattern. So here we see major space, minor space, minor space, entrance in here, entrance here. Again, this is mislabeled. It says Unity. It should be Larkin. Balconies running around in Larkin. These hollow tubes that Larkin happened to be the first centrally air-conditioned building. So and these tubes are carrying the air conditioning. Here, tubes are toilets, elevators, etc. And so here's Larkin and Guggenheim. At first, very different. So in Kahn's terms, the design is different, but the form, central space, balconies running around, skylight in the middle. Central space, balcony running around, skylight in the middle. And here's the Guggenheim and Unity Temple. Balconies running around, skylight in the middle. These hollow tubes are handling the air, heating and ventilation coming up from below. And again, these tubes here will have the elevators, stairs, toilets dropping through here. And then here, again, these might not at first look too similar, the Guggenheim and Johnson Wax, but we see here's the balcony running around Johnson Wax, skylight in the middle. So, Wright has developed this pattern and then he just keeps reusing it. So here's a question. Why might an architect repeat these patterns? Why does he do that? Something for our students to think about.
Or maybe because if he figured out it was successful, so he thought, well, it's easier for me to be successful if I build up on the success that I have, right? But if we think about the architectural quality of all these patterns, the shafts, it's pretty clear why they were there, because of the air, because he had to put them somewhere, so that was the corner where they could fit. Then the major and minor space, that's kind of has to do probably with duality, or has to do with hierarchy of spaces that he had.
Yeah, the minor space would be in Larkin, it's where the lockers are for the workers, the toilets, stuff like that, and separate from the major working space.
Or if we compare it to Louis Kahn, who you just explained, Louis Kahn has the served and the serving space.
Correct.
The main space, for example, in the galleries where you have a place where the paintings are placed and sculpture, and then you have the serving space, which is where the installation,
stairs, toilets, elevators,
and so on are placed. So
right.
maybe something similar happens to Wright, but Wright kind of groups them in larger areas. So instead of spreading them around as Louis Kahn does, he kind of positions them in strategic parts of the building.
Right. There's actually it's a very famous story in the case of. Let me get to a slide of Larkin which has the right label on it, just so we don't confuse anybody. Well, let's go back to the previous lecture. Here's a Larkin. That's mislabeled too. Sorry about that. But this building started with these stairs inside, and then in a series of examples they move outward to come out here to be expressive. And then these are structural columns which are then hollow so that the mechanical goes through it. So he wants to integrate his structure and his air ducts in this, and it adds to his notion of organicness.
Which is very anti-classical, because in any classical building you would have the entrance right in the middle of the centered with the main building, right? While in his case, he's hiding the entrance now. So that's quite interesting from architectural standpoint, that the building is something that you access, but kind of sidewise, and almost like you have to walk around it, which is obviously Le Corbusier's architectural promenade. Le Corbusier always hides also the entrance of a building, usually behind. So you have to first experience the building and then find where the entrance is.
And if we think way back to the second week, we saw that in Frank Lloyd Wright's Roby House, where you look at this, great house, where's the entrance?
Right.
You go all the way around the back and it looks like you're going into a service tunnel or something.
Yeah.
That's the entrance. And why exactly they're doing this, other than to be anti-classical, I'm not so sure.
Well, maybe it has to do with the compression of space. You go from the outside, from the open, into some compressed area where the kind of the path and the access is restricted, and it's smaller scale, it's compressed. So you go through that small little space, you access through there, and then you go into the open space, and you're kind of blown away by the size and the scale of it. So the main space looks even bigger than what it is, because of your outer perception of the scale of the space. Maybe that's one of the reasons.
And we famously see that in the Guggenheim. You come in and it's very low.
Yes.
And then boom, up into that.
Well, you have that all over through architecture. Roman villas have obviously a compressed entrance, and then you open into the impluvium, and then you go into the garden. So it's very much an architectural device.
Right.
But out of all these patterns that you described, probably the one that I think is most interesting architecturally, if we can stay on this one, is the balcony running around the space. So of all of them, this is the one that makes you perceive the space in a unique way. This is the one that connects you to the space in different levels. You can observe the space from the ground floor, from the upper floor. So you kind of see the same thing, but from many different levels.
You can look across, see other people as they're moving through.
Exactly. So this is kind of very unique, almost like a building looking towards itself.
Right.
looking inwards, looking towards itself. Now, so that's an interesting device that he uses. Where does this balcony idea come from?
Maybe it's a desire for three-dimensionality to get beyond just the plan.
Mm-hmm.
So Louis Kahn thinks very much in plan. Remember when I went to University of Pennsylvania and we thought very much in plan, got to New York and I met students who had gone to Cooper Union and they thought very much in three dimensions. So you can really understand Louis Kahn's medical towers in plan, whereas one of the exercises that Cooper students used to do is build a model of falling water and then take it apart and put it back together again. So they really had a three-dimensional way of thinking.
Interesting.
So this finishes up, we've only got 2 lectures to go, and the next one we'll look at Frank Lloyd Wright in the 20th century. And the point we want to make is Wright's important not just because the buildings are beautiful, interesting, but they're really engaged with the culture. And then we'll finish with organic architecture.